This week's Terror of Tazria, we chance upon one of the most difficult, almost impossible sections of the Torah HaKdosha to comprehend. The notion of tzara'as is not a physical malady, but rather it's a spiritual malady. And Chazal understood very acutely that it's generally heaped upon an individual who has engaged in Lashon Hara. And the consequences of that Lashon Hara have a very, very significant impact on the people surrounding him, the people in whose midst that individual function lives, is close friends with, sits in shul near. That Lashon Hara could wreak havoc between husband and wife, between friends, between rabbeim and talmidim, talmidim and rabbeim, between people in the community at large. And yet, as difficult as it is to understand this spiritual malady, and as impossibly difficult it is to make simple understanding and give pshat to the psukim in the Sedra itself, to fully appreciate what the Kohen is looking at with the different shades of white and off-white and red and spottings of golden hair, contradistinction to black hairs. There's one significant pasuk in the Sedra that is so jarring in nature. Ve'im tifrach hatzaras ba'ar. The Torah tells us that if this leprosy should spread within the skin of the individual, v'chizasa hatzaras says kolor hanega, and indeed the person will be covered with this malady, me'rosh v'yad raglov, from head to toe. The Kohen looks and he sees that person is entirely covered with tzaras, with this leprosy. Then the next pasuk tells us, v'tihar es hanoga, then that individual who's covered with tzaras, who's covered with a nega, with an affliction that in smaller amount and portion would be effectively sent out, chutz lamachane, outside of the camp of Israel, to dwell and live alone, and inform others, Tomei Ikra, that I'm Tomei, do not approach. This person is covered with the same malady, head to toe. This person is considered to be tahar. How is that possible? Should it not be a simple kavachomer that if a person is rendered Tomei because of a relatively small amount of this affliction, how much more so if he's covered head to toe? Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, it's true and it's impossible to understand, and therefore we need to understand it as a chok, as one of those precepts given to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that tests our faith. We cannot simply begin to fathom its underpinnings. But comes along with Sam Sofer and he suggests as follows. He says, look at the Mitzorah. Is the Mitzorah worse than a murderer? Worse than an adulterer? That he is sent chutz lamachane, outside the camp of Israel? A murderer is not sent outside the camp of Israel. If we don't have proper Adam who gave him Asra, he's not sent outside the camp of Israel. A person who literally destroys family units by being a knife, an adulterer, he's not sent chutz lamachane. So why am Mitzorah sent out of the camps? Explains it Sam Sofer. He says it's simple. Because a murderer is understandably easily identified by the people at large, and consequently eschewed by the community at large. He's put in his place, and that place is not to be amongst us. He's effectively excised socially within the community. We'll have nothing to do with him. He's a murderer. An adulterer, one would hope, would be the same. But says it Sam Sofer, a person who speaks slander, ill of others, a Baal Lashon Hara, a person who engages in rechilas and causes machlokas, terrible, terrible disagreements and parting of ways between friends and family, between spouses at times, God forbid. Why, that person could be the person sitting next to us in shul, davening with fabulous kavanah, talis over his head, shuckling, learning the daf yomi. That individual, says the Sam Sofer, that person presents himself as having basar chai, as having flesh alive and well, except for a few spots that may be somewhat terrible in nature. But those spots can be covered up by a jacket, by a sleeve, by pants, by a yarmulke. And that individual, just as Sam Sofer, is such a great, potentially terrible, dangerous influence upon his friends and upon the Jewish community at large. So that individual, once identified, has to be thrown outside the camp, kept at a distance, lest he have great influence upon those who hold him dear, and perhaps even hold him in great esteem. Masha'en Kain, in contrast to a person who has saras, head to toe, why, that person is a recognized Baal Machlokas. Everyone knows that that person doesn't have a kind word to say about anyone else. That person is clearly physically identified as being such an individual that we need clearly keep at this great distance because he's dangerous. And therefore that person, says the Stam Sofer, need not be sent outside all of the camps. I guess it's kind of like the United Nations Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, who's able to say that Hamas is not a terrorist group for us, but rather it's a political movement. Such an individual, such a body of nations cannot, will not, refuses effectively to recognize the person as being a Metzora head to toe, being a terrorist head to toe, not from the river to the sea, from the tippy top of one's head to the bottom of one's feet. And when one fails to recognize that, oh, why, that is so dangerous, so frighteningly dangerous. And only those who properly understand and are able to see who that person genuinely is, who that group genuinely is, or those people have to see to it that not only are they removed outside the camps, but that they are seminally destroyed. Saras is difficult to understand, but when it creeps into the soul of people, and it's clearly to be witnessed from the top of their heads to the bottom of their feet, why, they are clearly recognized for whom they are. People, on the other hand, who are not covered from head to toe, and who have basar chai, human flesh, or they're people covered head to toe, but others are blind to that affliction and see them as having human flesh, why, indeed, then those people have to be properly shunned and thrown outside the camp of our civilization in order that we, God forbid, not fail to distinguish between those who are terrorists, those who have horrific influence upon the rest of the world, and those who effectively are the foundation of life itself. Have a good Shabbos.